From Rotary Magazine, this is the Rotary Voices podcast. I'm Andy Choi. Last episode, Rotary Magazine contributor Hannah Shaw took us through Hatay province in southeast Turkey, which was featured in the blockbuster movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. During the 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquakes, Hatay province sustained severe damages. More than 23,000 people lost their lives and more than 30,000 were injured. Regional Rotary leaders shared how they strategized their response just a couple hours after the first earthquake. Their subsequent plan would grow into a multi-million-dollar global relief effort that is ongoing today. In this episode, the journey continues as Rotary Magazine editor J.P. Swenson takes us to the city of Adıyaman, where local Rotary volunteers provided aid and comfort to earthquake survivors despite the great personal loss they themselves suffered.
In a valley in southeastern Turkey, there's a city called Adıyaman. A clock tower stands tall in the city center. The statue of a golden eagle sits above the 4 clocks fixed in the tower's column. But there's something chilling about these clocks. They are all frozen in time at 4:17, the moment of the first earthquake that devastated this city in February of 2023. It's 1 year after the earthquakes, a hot day in April. The harsh sun above is setting on Adıyaman, the golden light glistening on the clock tower's trimming. Traffic swerves through the surrounding roundabout, and Suat Baysan eagerly waits to cross the street to visit the clock tower again. He calls it sacred.
It's sacred, very historical, and feelings are very high when you stand in front of this tower.
In the area around it, shells of destroyed buildings and abandoned businesses loom over fields of rubble, where people are still sifting through what once was. Large machinery tears down buildings with cracked windows, tilted and unstable. Countless apartments remain uninhabitable. In the days that followed the earthquakes, crowds of survivors gathered around this clock tower to grieve their loved ones and their city.
The tower stopped because the tower didn't want to witness what's going to happen in the next minute. I cried when I first came here.
Suat was a Rotary district governor at the time. Together with his fellow district governor, Emre Öztürk, Suat had his boots on the ground all over Turkey, helping to build the infrastructure for Rotary's relief efforts. In Adıyaman alone, Rotary built a field hospital, container homes, an animal hospital, a kindergarten, a water filtration system, and that's just scratching the surface.
Rotary has done a great work here. So I'm really proud. A lot of things have been put together, and people are working to rebuild and reshape their lives again. They have lost their loved ones, that's for sure, but now they are trying to rebuild, redesign their futures. That's what makes me very happy.
Suat is right. There's still a lot of work to be done in Adıyaman before life will feel normal again. After all, mountains still peek through what remains of the city's skyline, no longer blocked by towering concrete. On those distant mountaintops, cranes are building new housing. But ultimately, those cranes serve as a constant reminder to residents that today, the city is in an extended period of transition. In the meantime, with Rotary's help, hope has returned to Adıyaman. And that's what brings me here. Since the earthquakes in 2023, which killed more than 55,000 people in Turkey and Syria, Rotary has distributed over $4 million to support affected communities in Turkey. This relief touched nearly all facets of life in southeast Turkey, from donating pregnant cows to farmers to mental health resources for children. Emre and Suat have been traveling around the region with me and my colleague Hannah Shaw to show us Rotary's impact in the aftermath of the earthquakes. It's hard to overstate Rotary's work here. And while I could list the number of container homes donated or the tonnage of water that's been filtered for drinking, that's not why Suat and Emre brought me to Adıyaman. I'm here to meet their friend, a man named Ferit Binzet. Ferit lives in a neighborhood in the center of Adıyaman, just down the street from a beautiful garden, the Adıyaman Museum, and the city's soccer stadium. Our entourage's van pulls up to Ferret's apartment building, and we head inside. A few bags of pet food sit on the floor. Ferret and his wife, Matap, distribute about 2 tons of this food to the stray cats and dogs of Adiyaman every year. They receive the food from Rotarians around the country. If Ferret and Matap are nothing else, they are animal lovers. Their cat Maya sits with Matap all day while she works in her art studio. As I walk up the stairs, I see vines painted along the walls. This too is Matap's work. When she's not working on her art, she's serving as president of the Rotary Club of Adiyaman Nemrut. Today, Matap's parents are visiting, and we're just in time for tea and coffee. Their apartment is picturesque. The walls are adorned with more of Matap's designs. I look around and see pictures of Ferret's family, of his life before the earthquakes. Ferret was born in Adiyaman and has spent the vast majority of his life here working as a broadcast journalist for mainstream Turkish channels for over 25 years. He's also a Rotarian, just like Matap. Emre translates as I ask Ferret to paint a picture of his life.
Before the earthquake, one of the best cities in the southeastern part of Turkey. Yeah, there are, lakes and dams around the city, and the Nemrut mountain, they call it the 8th wonder of the world. So now it is one of the worst cities in the region because of the earthquake. It affected here very much than the others. Many people died, many people left. Those who had higher educations, they all left the city. So there was a brain migration. Those who stayed here are the ones who couldn't go away. They didn't have any money or opportunity or any profession to be able to go somewhere else.
Ferret and Matap didn't always live in this apartment. They lived in a building on the southeast corner of Adiyaman in a neighborhood called Altın Şehir. They had a beautiful home and a beautiful garden. Ferret recalls waking up to the sounds of birds in the morning. He built a shelter on their balcony so the stray cats could escape the snow in the winter. February 6th, 2023, the morning of the earthquake.
The night before, the cat was so uncomfortable, so it was always meowing until 4 a.m. in the morning. We believe she felt the earthquake.
Ferret and Matap had just fallen asleep 10 or 15 minutes ago, when suddenly
they heard the, sounds like goom, goom, goom, goom, and the bed was shaking. They understood that it was an earthquake. They had a long corridor in the house, and the walls were just exploded into the corridor. And then he prayed to the God that, my God, please don't take my soul here. And he started to cry, and then the walls of the kitchen completely fell off.
They managed to escape and ran outside. Ferret looked back at the building and saw his brother, who was staying with them at the time.
So when he went out the house, but his brother stayed in the home because he was shocked.
Screams rang out through the heavy rain. Waves of concrete were rolling through the streets. Buildings wavered and fell around him. The back wall of Ferret and Matap's building collapsed. And then, after 85 seconds of trembling, the earth stilled.
So when the earthquake stopped, his brother was still at home, so he ran into the house. So he slapped him to, make him conscious again. And his wife said, we can't leave without the cats. Everywhere were dust and rubbles. So they found the 2 cats, and then they took them out and then left the house. Bir daha da girmediniz. And they never entered again.
The cats were trembling. Matap, Ferret, and his brother were standing in the rain, soaking wet. They had no car. It was in the shop. Finally, a few hours later, Ferret's brother-in-law came to pick them up.
When they're driving from the main street,
nasıl diye. Bütün binalar yola
And
devrildi.
they've seen all the buildings collapsed onto the road.
Sonra hepimiz ağlamaya başladık.
Then everybody
Allah'ım
started to
be.
cry.
Yani çok böyle korku filmi gibiydi.
It was like a horror movie.
Bir iki
When I looked at the buildings, 3 out of every 5 buildings were collapsed, and everybody was screaming. Under the rubble, people were shouting, "Save us! Rescue us! We can't breathe." He recorded this, with his cell phone, and he sent it to news centers.
When Ferret called the mainstream news channels to tell them about the earthquake, he was met with an unexpected response.
They said, it's not time now. They're calling from Antakya. There's an earthquake there, and he calls again. And then they say, no, it's not the time. They're calling from Malatya. And he calls again, no, they call from Diyarbakir. And he understands that the earthquake is everywhere.
So Ferret called a fellow journalist in the city. At the time, his friend was sitting at one of the popular bazaars in the city.
And his friend told him that, it's completely collapsed. There is no Adiyaman anymore. Then he understood, how big the earthquake was.
The roads were blocked by rubble, so they were forced to walk around. Ferret and his brother wanted to check on their mother, who had Alzheimer's. When they arrived at her house, the door was wide open, and her nurse had left.
So his mom said, I'm dizzy, what's happening? So she didn't understand the earthquake and his Alzheimer.
They tried to convince her to leave the building, but then, at 1:24 p.m., the second earthquake began.
So they had to run away. They had to leave their mom because they couldn't, take her safely.
But his brothers stayed with their mom.
Ferit was outside the building, so he saw the next building was turning. It was not shaking, it was turning. And when the earthquake stopped, half of the building was collapsed completely, and then his brother jumped off the balcony.
Ferret, his brother, and their mom made it out safely. All around them, they saw buildings collapse as the second earthquake stopped.
Many people were at their houses, trying to get their, personal stuff from the houses. Most of those who were rescued from the first earthquake died because they entered to their houses, trying to get their personal items. And then the second earthquake happened, and they also died.
After the second quake, Ferret's phone rang. It was one of his friends. Has the looting started? His friend asked. Why? Everybody is trying to save their lives, Ferret replied. His friend explained that there's looting after every earthquake. And within the first 24 hours in Adiyaman, all the markets were looted.
He says, may Allah, forgive us for what we have done during those harsh times.
People became desperate. There was no electricity, no food, and little shelter. Ferret pulls out his phone to show me a video he took in a gym on the first night.
And people had already settled there, He thought that, people were lying there. And he went to the security guard and he said that, many people are lying on the floor. Why is that so? And the security guard said that they're not alive people, they're dead bodies. And then he fainted. Yeah, Ferit fainted, yeah. The first few days, the dead bodies were coming in trucks, many. And he said if, the dead bodies are being transported by trucks, then the Adiyaman is finished.
The rain didn't stop for 3 days as survivors tried to recover the bodies of their loved ones. The army wrote numbers on the bodies' arms and took pictures of them. Survivors could visit an online archive of the photos to find where their relatives were buried. Ferret lost a total of 41 relatives in the earthquakes.
Grand aunt, 2 of her sons, their spouses, their children, their uncles, 5 daughters.
A few weeks before my colleague Hannah and I came to Turkey, it was Ramadan, a holy month of fasting, prayer, and reflection in the Islamic faith. A holiday when people across the country spend time with their loved ones. But for Ferret and Matap, it's become a reminder of what they lost in the earthquakes.
So we had a very nice life here in Adıyaman before the earthquake. But, after the earthquake, we don't have anybody here, all the relatives gone. During the Ramadan and other holidays, people visit each other. And we used to go to 15, 20 different places in the past. So the last Ramadan, we could only go to 2 houses. We don't have... we don't have anybody here. We can't recover the people we lost. They will not come back.
Doğru bir şey. Benim ailem çok büyük bir aileydi.
I have no one left, so all the wealth you could have in this world, money, all the properties, all the things you have, they don't mean anything at this moment.
Every day immediately following the earthquakes, Ferret was crying. He wanted to leave Adiyaman, as many did. Those who stayed had no choice. But fortunately for the people of Adiyaman, Ferret found a reason to stay there. Ferret pulls up another video on his phone. It shows a toilet overflowing with waste and menstrual products.
So this was a filter toilet because there was no water, nobody cleaning there. There are hygienic pads over there, women's hygienic pads. So when he broadcasted these, hygienic pads came here to the region. Then he understood what a big mission he has here. All the people needed help, and he was also reporting as a journalist. And every day he was reporting a list of needed items on the news channels. So he was asking for example, hygiene material. Then lots of hygiene material comes, and then another need arises, for example, underwear. Then he asks for underwear, then comes the underwear. So every day he was, reporting the list of needs.
Ferret's news reporting helped him understand and broadcast the needs of Adiyaman and its people. Throughout the day of the earthquakes, Emre, whose district encompasses the affected area, called local Rotary Club presidents and district team members who live there. One of his calls was to Ferret, who was then the president of the Rotary Club of Adiyaman Nemrut. Ferret's talents as a journalist, reporting the needs of his community, proved vital when he communicated with Emre.
When we reported the needs, Emre Governor, me, he provided the tents. Yeah, but this was like a race because tents were needed everywhere in the earthquake area, but they were limited.
The roads were in ruins, but Emre and Suat made it to Adiyaman, slowly but surely. With the help of Ferret and local Rotary members, they founded the first tent city in Adiyaman.
We set up the tents, and then there were some other needs for those people living in the tent cities. People needed blankets, clothes, beds, mattresses, anything you can imagine, they needed. So everybody was in rush to help. So there was a collaborative from all around the world. Everything was packed and then sent to the earthquake region. Aslında üs kurduk diyebiliriz yani, değil mi? Then we set up a base here at Adiyaman, and we collected all the goods coming to that base and distributed to those who needed them.
Emre stayed in the tent city for 45 days to help Ferret facilitate the relief effort. If cargo planes arrived at the airport and no one was there to receive them, the planes had to take off with the aid. So Ferret and Emre arranged transportation from the airport to the city. Rotary established a dedicated disaster response fund that received more than $2.7 million in contributions, and global grants provided an additional $1.4 million. So where did that money go? Well, in Adiyaman, like other affected cities, it went towards immediate efforts like tent cities, medical needs, generators, and then the second stage was container cities, which you heard about in the last episode. And finally, the money went to long-term recovery projects, like field hospitals, schools, and water filtration systems.
When you're telling people that Rotary is the world's one of the oldest and the largest NGOs, it doesn't mean anything to most of the people, but when you show these, people, really understand that it is really a big NGO.
Ferret's role in organizing this relief in Adıyaman cannot be overstated. Despite their great personal loss, he and Matap were able to bring hope to their city. And realistically, Rotary members accomplished far more with these projects than I can even list here. So instead, I'm going to take you with me as Suat, Emre, Ferret, and Matap give us a glimpse into Rotary's work in Adıyaman, starting with the field hospital that has been operational since April of 2023. The hospital is currently in a container city, but initially this was the site of a tent city. It treats about 200 patients every day, and it has its own generators, an ambulance, monitoring and ultrasound devices, a blood testing lab, and even a dedicated container that doctors can sleep in following their shifts.
So this is the doctor's first initial room when the patient comes in. The patient, the nurse, the first treatment, and then where they check the patient here.
Today, Chief Physician Mesut Kocadağ sits with a patient surrounded by the hospital's white canvas walls.
Adım Mesut Kocadağ. Burada doktor olarak görev yapıyorum.
Mesut Kocadağ, he is the full-time doctor in this hospital.
Mesut is also a survivor of the earthquakes in Adıyaman. Can you talk a little bit about what he saw and what he...
Neler gördünüz, neler yaptınız?
Gördüğüm şey Adıyaman'da binaların %50'ye yakını yerdeydi. Yollar kapalıydı.
The roads were closed, and he were hearing the screams of the people who were under the rubble. Müthiş.
Yaşayacağımızı düşünmüyordum.
He never thought that he's going to continue living.
I asked Mesut what the strain on the healthcare system in Adıyaman looked like immediately after the earthquakes.
Sistemlere bile defin ruhsatı verilmeden gömüldüler.
Yeah, he's saying that the health system also collapsed because there was even no place to bury the dead. They were just lying in the corridors in the hospitals. Treatment of the wounds, bleeding,
Amputasyonlar vardı.
amputations, legs, hands, basically trauma.
Other healthcare workers came from all over the world to help with the cases. Mesut is very grateful for them, as they helped prevent the system from further collapse.
4 gün çok zorlu bir süreç.
So first 3-4 days were the most difficult because there was no electricity, no power, no water, no heating, and it was very cold. He spent kaç gün? 3 gün mü?
3 gün.
3 days outside without any clothing on himself. One thing was they were
Her şey salıverilmiş bir vaziyette.
sort of lost their morality of living.
People lost their appetites, suffered from scabies and gastrointestinal diseases, and endured poor hygienic conditions. Some injuries suffered will last a lifetime. But today, Mesut's biggest concern is COVID mutations. Fortunately, the hospital is equipped with a vaccine refrigerator and a vaccination area for children. Suat walked me through the container city next to the field hospital.
Okay, now we are at the container city that is being constructed by municipality of Mersin, and we help them to construct this site by the help of whole Rotary family in the world. So you will see all these containers with plaquettes where the funds come from. So it's fully furnished, including TV, utensils and everything. So 2 streets are there. One street is the Imagine Street, and the other one is the Hope Street. So let's have a look of one of the families. İsminizi ve kendinizden biraz bahseder misiniz?
Saadet pişirici olan. Ben tek yaşıyorum.
Sadet Pichirici is a 74-year-old woman living in one of these Rotary container homes, just a short distance from the field hospital. I asked Sadet about her life before the earthquakes and how it's different today.
It was a proper life. His children were married and she was living alone.
Evim 2 oda 1 salon.
She has a nice house in the city with 2 rooms and a large living room. He says, "Are you happy that you're living in this container?" He says, "Thanks God 1,000 times."
Allah her zaman dua ediyor.
We are praying for those who have really helped us. And since I am also old and living alone, life is very difficult for me.
Suat asked her about the field hospital. She didn't realize that this too was a Rotary project.
But now she realized that it's been done by Rotary. She said, oh, we're very happy with the health center. It's been completed by Rotary. Oh, really? Amazing.
What are her hopes for the future?
Gelecekle ilgili düşünceleriniz, ne yapmayı planlıyorsunuz?
Can sağlığı versin.
First thing I wish is I will keep
Allah
on
o çocuklarıma
having a composure in my body so that I don't keep on walking and enjoying life.
Her hopes echo those of survivors we spoke to all over Turkey. For many, the way forward starts with their children and grandchildren. And so what does she hope for her grandchildren?
Let them study, go to school, and become citizens of this country. They are also living in a container city.
The last prong of the Rotarians' response plan is sustainable long-term projects. And this is where Adıyaman's vision for the future really comes into view. It's just a couple of days after Turkey's national sovereignty and Children's Day, a national holiday celebrating the Grand National Assembly of Turkey's founding in 1920. Turkey's founder, Mustafa Ataturk, believed that Turkey's bright future would materialize through its youth, an ideal that is not lost on the nation today. Our caravan makes a stop at a local kindergarten that was rebuilt with funds from Japanese Rotary Zones 1, 2, and 3. The school's principal, Saliha Oslam Atli, welcomes us inside.
Kendi şahsım adına Özlem Atlı ben.
Today, the holiday decorations still hang amidst toys and mini chairs. I wanted to learn more about what the immediate needs of the kids were after the earthquakes and what it's been like to work with them. Emre translates for us.
İlk başta bir okul ortamına ihtiyaçları vardı.
The first thing they needed was love, caring, and then environment for school. So they didn't have it at the beginning.
Evet.
So at first, since the families were also affected by the earthquake and they had traumas as well, they didn't care their children. So the children needed some, caring. And when, she started here as the principal, as manager of the school, the children didn't have any hope. So that is what they gave at the beginning.
Benim ekibim de çok güzel.
So after that, they needed materials like toys, like books for the children, because this is a kindergarten. With the support of our clubs, they now have all of these stuff. And this kindergarten is at the outskirts of the city, so it's like a rural area. So nobody can believe that there's such a nice school here. And she says the team here is also great.
Toparlandık. Çok iyi şu an.
The kids now are in a much better position than the first case. So they every morning hug their teachers and kiss them, and they start the lectures. But also the teachers had trauma. Some are still living in containers, but as a family here, they're supporting each other, and they're happier than before.
What are the aspirations of some of the kids? I'm kind of curious what they want to be when they grow up, or their dreams.
Genelde büyüyünce çoğu öğretmen olmak istiyor. Buradaki çünkü çok fazla rol modelleri yok bu mahallede.
She says there are students, who has never been to a theater, has never gone to a movie at a cinema. So her first project is taking them to, theaters and movies. Most of the students want to be teachers when they grow up because they have very limited role models. So they only see the teachers here and they want to become teachers when they grow up.
İnşallah Adıyaman'ın en gözde okul yapmak.
I want to make this school the best kindergarten in Adıyaman.
Ferret and Matap were eager for our next stop, a veterinary clinic, which includes a pet ambulance, aptly named a pawbulance.
Ambulance for your paw.
I think the pun lands a bit better in Turkish. When we enter the clinic, a cat stands on a metal table in the middle of the room, surrounded by the vet's staff. Today, this cat is being treated with internal and external parasite medication. Meows and barks echo from nearby rooms.
Maybe the first pet clinic of Rotary on the world, as far as we know, yeah.
Was this fully funded by Rotary?
Yes.
Oh, The clinic is named after a dog named Proteo.
Proteo was a Mexican search and rescue dog who came during the earthquake. Proteo saved 2 lives under the rubbles. And then he had an accident during the rescue and he lost his life here. Yeah, so he saved 2 lives and also he gave his life as well, here. So this clinic is devoted to his name.
The clinic sees anywhere from 5 to 30 animals a day, according to Metap Odin, a vet at the clinic.
She says that there was an increase in the stray animals after the earthquake. Tabii sahipleri, and also other diseases have increased. So it's very proper for the human as well as the animal health. It's very important that this clinic provides that service.
So now you've heard from a few of these projects in Adıyaman. It was clear to me that Rotary's efforts here in the city have touched every element of life, both long-term and short-term, both human and animal. And it's largely thanks to Ferret and Metap, who overcame great personal loss to help their community in the face of tragedy, bringing hope to their city. Ferret was able to leverage his friendships all over the globe and apply his background as a reporter to make this all come together. And at least some things a year after the earthquakes are business as usual. Children bike and play in the streets. Conversation is exchanged over aromatic platters of kebab. And the melodic echo of prayer crackles over loudspeakers 5 times a day. It's April 26th, 2024, 12:48 p.m. Prayer time in Adıyaman. Metap and Ferret step out of their car into the stillness of their old neighborhood, where they lived before the earthquakes. Their apartment spills into the street around them, where it will stay until the city clears the rubble. Ferret is yelling the word gece. So what is he calling out right now?
He's calling the cat they were looking after at the garden. His name is Gece, means night. So he's, very fond of animals,
Çok güzel bir site ama.
So how often does he come back here?
Buraya sık geliyor musun abi?
Evet, sürekli mama vermeye geliyor.
Yeah,
Gece
he comes here quite often to
Yeşil.
feed the animals. Yeah. So the cats and dogs, know Ferit and Metap, and when they come, they know that there's food with them. So
And so how does he feel when he comes here and sees, his old
buraya
house?
gelip de işte evi gördüğünde nasıl hissediyorsun diyor.
ya insan moral bozuluyor bütün.
Because he
Analarımız hep buradaydı. Biz
all his
evlendik,
memories were
buraya
here.
girdik.
When they married, they moved here, and
İlk burada
so
geçtik.
they lived here for 12 years.
Tabii.
So when they come here, they think what they have experienced at the earthquake, how they survived. So it makes them down to come here, but they regularly come to feed the animals.
O günü tekrar yaşıyor.
Oh, every time she comes here, she lives that day again. So it's not easy for them. They remember how they left the house, how the sound, of the earthquake.
Travmada çoğu eğitimi psikolog diyordu biz bugün yapmayalım.
When they go to the psychologist, when they tell their stories, the psychologist cried more, and most of the time she said, okay, let's don't do it today. So they're sad stories.
Yani bir de kendi evimizi sadece görmek
Tabii.
bizi üzmüyor.
Not only our house and our bad experience, but all the people we know, all our neighbors we knew. So everywhere we look, we remember the beloved ones, and we also suffer from their pains.
Bu bu bizim için çok sıradan bir manzara olmaya
So we got
başladı.
used to all those
Sen
rubbles
wow
and collapsed
derken
buildings,
ben
and
sabah
when you look
akşam
at this,
bununla yatıp
we
kalkıyorum.
got used to those landscapes
Biz şimdi
everywhere.
Adıyaman'ın dışına gittiğimizde bize tuhaf geliyor. Yani
When
insanlar
we go
yine
out of
çıkıp
Adıyaman,
eğleniyor.
then it's
Toz
weird to
yok,
us,
çukur
there is
yok.
no dust, there are no holes, there are no collapsed buildings. We got used to these, scene
Ama
every
yüksek
day in
binada
Adıyaman.
oturan hiç kimsenin daha evine gitmedik.
And we have never visited anyone living in an upper story building.
O hala bizi rahatsız ediyor yani.
So it still disturbs us.
And so, is it therapeutic to help people in the way that they've helped people? Does it help them with?
Ya başkalarına yardımcı olmak sizin de
Tabii o
size de
bizi
iyi
rahatlattı.
geldi.
Yani.
Yeah, it relieves
O
them a
bizi
lot. You know.
rehabilite etti yani.
That was the thing that rehabilitated us,
Çünkü hani
helping the other
benden
people.
daha acılı insanlar
And I
vardı.
have seen many people who had more sorrow than I had, he says.
O mesela senden
So helping them
protez
is,
diyen
makes
kızın
us feel
ayağını
better.
göster.
He says thank God. Although they had a bad
Ben
experience,
mesela-
many people had worse experiences.
And so, what does he hope for the future for Adıyaman?
Gelecekte Adıyaman için ne umut ediyorsun?
Valla bu şehrin geri eski haline gelmesi çok zor.
It is very difficult for the
Bir de
city
biz
to get to
Bu
its
kentte
old
yaşayanların
situation.
hepsi tozu, aspesi o kadar
All the
soktu ki
people lived here
İnşallah
have
olmayız diyoruz ama
inhaled the
kanser olma
asbestos,
riskimiz çok
and we
yüksek.
have higher risks of cancer.
Siz de bize dua edin diyebiliriz
And
ancak. Ne
you
edeyim?
pray for us. That's what he says.
Biz onun için diyoruz. İyi ki Rotary var.
Thank God there is Rotary.
İyi ki de Rotaryen olmuşuz.
Thank God I'm a Rotarian.
İyi ki de böyle işte Emre Guvernör gibi, sizler gibi dünyanın her yerinde dostlarımız var.
Thank God we have friends like, Governor Emre and you, like people all around the world.
Keşke demek yerine iyi ki demek daha iyi.
Yeah. So he says,
Yani
it's better to say thank God instead of saying, I wish.
I only met Ferret and Matop yesterday. Yet, as we stand outside the ruins of their old life, with Gege the cat looking on nearby, it feels like I've known Ferret for a lifetime. As I look back on our trip, I think in some ways I met him 1,000 times. I saw him and his fellow survivors who live in the containers he helped bring to Adıyaman. I saw him and his fellow Rotarians like Suat and Emre. I even saw him and Gege the cat, who answered his calls, seeking comfort in his friend from a previous life, before the city they both knew so well was turned upside down. As we drove out of Adıyaman through the mountainous road, I felt sad to leave. I knew I would miss Ferret and Matop. But next to my sadness, I also felt hope and pride that I'm on the long list of lives that Ferret and Matop have touched.
This episode of the Rotary Voices podcast was produced by JP Swenson and Hannah Shaw and edited by Wen Huang. Production by Yusu Kim. I'm Andy Choi. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast and Spotify and share it with your friends. The Rotary Voices podcast is produced by Rotary Magazine, the official monthly publication of Rotary International. Thanks for listening.